In this video, we're going to show how you add users from the command line. This is how you will do it on most servers, since many servers do not have a GUI. And this is a nice way just to get familiar with doing it. First of all, we want to log in as the super user. So I type in the password, and now I'm the super user. I need to change to the etc directory, which is all our configuration files. And the important thing to look at here are three files. One is called password, one is called group, and one is called shadow. We will take a quick look at each of these files. We could add the user by going through each of these files individually. However, that is really not recommended to do, because if you get anything out of sync, you're going to have lots of problems. This here is the password file, and if you look at the password file, you see we have the username. The X is where the password used to go when we're using it. It now goes in the shadow file for security reasons. We have the user ID, the group ID, the name, some other information, the home directory, and then the shell that's used for the user when they log in interactively. If you leave this shell off, then this user cannot log in interactively, which is sometimes done for various uses. Or the other thing you'll see it say like bin false, which means there's no shell associated with it. The next file to look at is the group file. And you'll notice that the group file looks very similar to like what we saw with the password file. You have the user, you have the X, and then you also have the ID of the group. The last file to look at is the shadow. And the shadow file is where the passwords are kept. When we look at this one, you'll see that this user has an encrypted password and some other information. This is a file that really should not be edited if you can avoid it, because it creates a lot of problems. However, some older administrators who've been around for a long time know how to edit these, and they'll do that. The easiest way is to use a command called add user, and you give a username. In this case, we'll call it user1. At this point in time, the first thing it's going to do is create everyone and bring it up so that we've got it. In this case, the home directory already existed, so we didn't have to create the home directory. That's because I've tested this user before. We'll give the user password called user1. It'll read prompt for it. Now after that, it gives the full name, so we'll say user1. We'll give the room number if you want a room number on this. Work phone number, you can do the phone number, or you can skip the home phone number and other information you want. If this is all correct, you hit enter, and now it's created. Now what do these files look like that we just did? Well, let's look at the password file. And if we go down there, you see here is our user1, and it's got some of that information we've entered. If we look at the group file, you see that we now have here a group 1, or a group user1 group. And then if we look into the shadow file, you will see we have our user1, and it's got its password all encrypted and everything in here, plus all these numbers. So now we've just added a new user. Now this can be actually tested by doing su-user1, and it's going to prompt me for the user1 username. In this case, since I'm in root, it doesn't have to. But if I do pwd, you see I'm now user1. Now I can use Control D to exit out of this. I'm back to my root shell. I've already got the user. At this point in time, now I want to remove the user. So what I'll do is let's do del user, and we'll give it a name user1. At this point in time, it removes the user. And now if we go back and look at our files, you see that our password file no longer has our user1, it's missing altogether. And if we go back to the group file, you'll see our user1 group is missing. And if we go to the shadow file, you see our user1 is missing from there. So now the user is totally missing. However, if we go to the home directories, you'll see user1 still exists. So to fully remove this, we want to do remove dir user1 and we must do it with the recursive minus RF, which means recursive enforced. And what's going to happen here is that this will remove the entire user and all its contents. Now the user is completely removed from the system. Now, let's look at doing this through what many users would use who are novice users. We could use the GUI in KDE to do this, at which point we come up here to the applications, then the system, and then at this point in time, the very last thing here is a user manager, or a key user. And this is the GUI version of it, very similar to what Windows has. Once this starts up here, you'll see that we actually can get the list of users here. And again, they show us all our users, and it doesn't show the one we have. We could add a user if we want here, just by typing it in. And in this case, we'll say user 1. And at this point in time, notice we've got the ID, we've got the set password options, we've got all this account, and see how the account is disabled by default. So we can actually make this a usable account. We can set the password, which we'll use as user 1, and then it'll sit there. Oops, we go there, so we can set the password again because I didn't quite get it right. So what we need is user 1. We need to tab down user 1. Now this time when I hit OK, it will actually set the password. Now we have everything. We click OK. You'll see we come up, and there's our user 1 user. Right? And there's the same information we had before, so you can modify it at any time. Now let's say we want to delete the user. Right? We select delete, and it'll say delete user 1. Notice we now can say we can delete both the home box and the mail if it exists. We'll say delete everything because this will create everything. It will actually delete everything quickly, and now our user is no longer there. And we want to delete the private group because the private group doesn't exist as well. That is how you can add users in both a GUI and in the command line based in Linux.